Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Diane Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is August 9th, 2023. And have I got a guest for you today. Her name is Reenita Hora, and she is just phenomenal. She has had a successful career working in Ayurvedic medicine. Then she became a journalist, doing a lot of work in the financial field. And now she has written a fiction book called Operation Mom, which is just gaining attention and winning awards all over the place. We had the most incredible conversation, and I hope you're going to love listening to it just as much as I enjoy doing it. Now, of course, I have a lot of announcements to make as far as Burkhart books and things that I'm getting ready to do. We have got so much going on. I am just driving myself crazy trying to keep up with everything, and I think I'm driving my husband crazy too, but he's used to me, so it's okay. But I have got all kinds of announcements, which we will have at the end of the podcast today. So be sure to stick around as usual. And don't forget, next week we will have the second half of the interview with Reenita Hora, when she will actually read from part of her award-winning book, Operation Mom. So you will definitely want to come back next week and check that out. But for now, let's get on with this great interview. Please welcome to Book Banter with Diane Burkhart, Reenita Hora. I am so thrilled to welcome my next guest to the show, Reenita Hora. She is somebody that I am just absolutely in awe of. Once you hear her credentials, you will understand why. Welcome to my show.
Diane, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I'm thrilled to be here and very flattered with everything you've just said. Wow, this is going to be a hard act to live up to.
I think once people hear just a few of the publications that you have actually worked for, I'm sure everybody will agree with me that you have an impressive career. You have been a contributing author to so many publications: The Hindu, South China Morning Post, The New York Times, Asian Investor, Times of India, National Geographic Kids, Cartoon Network Asia, Disney, Entrepreneur.com. I mean, what have you not done in journalism?
Oh, goodness. We have this joke at home, and it's not even a joke. I mean, there's, behind every joke, there is this hard nugget of truth. But my family members will say, I am a bored human being. And they're right. I spin it slightly differently. I say, well, I will do anything to get away from my nuclear family. Many, many years ago, I started out actually in a very different line of business, and that was being an Ayurveda clinician, Ayurveda being the natural medicine of India. I had a practice, I worked with hospital, I worked with health centers and created Ayurvedic training programs, etc. And had an Ayurvedic product line as well as part of all of this, and ended up writing 4 books on Ayurveda, which somehow led to me becoming sort of a contributing writer on health and wellness in general, which then led to the health and wellness of the planet, i.e. sustainability and sustainability issues. But I was living in San Francisco in those days, and we were hit by the global financial crisis. I had to move to Hong Kong with my family. My husband was in finance, and found myself there as a freelance journalist, essentially. There was less interest relative to, certainly today, from what I see, and just relative to interest in subjects like sustainability. They were very interested in anything I knew about money and finance, things attached to that, real estate, whatever it might be. So within days, literally, I found myself researching and writing articles for various financial publications or articles on the topic of personal finance, commercial finance, whatever it might be, for other publications. One thing led to another, and I started contributing to all of the publications that you mentioned. Now, of course, when it comes to Disney and Cartoon Network and certainly National Geographic Kids, those stories were not about finance. I think that's obvious. But sort of my mainstay, if you will, my bread and butter became financial journalism, which led me to creating a show on public radio in Hong Kong for RTHK Radio 3 called Money for Nothing. I named it after the Dire Straits song, to then working for Bloomberg. And that was all broadcast, or I should say Bloomberg primarily broadcast, although I definitely delved into print and TV, and certainly everybody writes everything for the terminal as well.
Yeah.
And then various other publications, such as the South China Morning Post, the Times of India, etc. A lot of stories and articles on various things to do with finance. So yes, indeed, it's been a very interesting journalism career, because once I came back to San Francisco from Hong Kong, San Francisco was this small place with, I thought, limited stories. I know it sounds crazy. The big story there is tech. We all know that. Mm-hmm. But once you have lived in a financial center or been employed in a newsroom in a financial center, a place like Hong Kong, where there are multiple kinds of stories coming at you every single day, and it's very, very interesting. Coming to this very, very small newsroom in San Francisco, where the major story every day is just tech. I know just tech sounds so limiting, but there's all sorts of different kinds of tech. So I do appreciate that. But still, I missed the international stories, the stories on China, things filtering in from elsewhere in Asia, sort of the round-the-clock newsroom where we'd be coming off of the New York day, closing up the Hong Kong day, going into the London day. None of that happened in San Francisco. So that actually took me out of journalism into tech. Surprise, surprise, because we're back in San Francisco. And, really, I said, okay, if we're back in San Francisco, I might as well go back, or go into, I should say, tech. And I went into audio tech, my background being audio. So it was the advent at the time of things like podcasting. I trained my Bloomberg colleagues in the very, very first podcasts.
Wow.
Yeah, first podcasts sort of happened when I was still there, and then went to work for an audio tech company in the podcasting discovery space. One thing then again leads to another, and I won't go into sort of each milestone, but fast forward to the pandemic. I'm working for SRI International, which is Silicon Valley's Pioneer Science Research Institute, and decided to leave my full-time day job mid-pandemic to focus almost exclusively on my own IP, whether that was books, audio shows, podcasts, some screenplays I've written, my chapter by episode digital publishing platform, etc. So it's definitely been a journey and continues to be one.
Well, you're also a limited partner in How Women Invest Fund. What is that about?
Yes, indeed. I mean, and that definitely harks back to sort of my business finance background. That is a fund. It is women-owned, and it is a fund that invests in women-owned or women-centered businesses. There's a lot happening these days with diversity, I think, on almost every level of industry, in diversity and inclusion. Certainly we see that in storytelling, but also in industry. And in Silicon Valley, it might come as a surprise to many people to know that women have not traditionally had it as easy as their male counterparts. in all levels of the tech industry. Even though you see a lot of women in the tech industry and increasingly in engineering, in programming, in business operations, when it comes to boards, when it comes to senior positions, when it comes to rising the ranks, they've traditionally not had an easy time and certainly not on level with their male peers. So the How Women Invest Fund was specifically put together to encourage women to invest so that they can reap the benefits of their own investments into other companies that are also women-owned and have female boards, etc.
And you also mentioned your chapter by episode. That's one of your new projects, isn't it?
Yes, that is a relatively new project. Essentially, what that is, it's a digital publishing platform. It is an app, essentially. So the best way to really understand what it is to download the app and check it out. It features a whole range of genre-based stories. By genre-based stories, I mean mystery, thriller, paranormal, romance, fantasy, you name it. And the stories are brought to you in a structure that we call chat fiction. Chat fiction is not long-form fiction like picking up a book in the bookstore and reading it, but rather the story is delivered to you, to the reader, through a chat process, a process which looks like you're chatting with your friend. So it's character A, character B, character A, character B, a little bit like a screenplay, but not exactly like a screenplay, more like a chat on your phone with a little bit of narrative wrapped around that chat session in order to give it context. So yes, chapter by episode. The stories are short. The books are short, usually I would say 4 to 5 chapters, which are then broken down into 3 to 5 episodes each. So the idea being that you can get through this fairly quickly. And as you're looking at it on your phone, you're not looking at all of this long form text, which increasingly in doing the research, we have found that with the millennials and the Gen Z segments of the market, they get overwhelmed by looking at all of this text on their phone. So going through that chat structure and process seems to be an easier way and a more efficient way to digest the content.
That sounds like such a cool idea. I think it
Yes.
would work really well for a lot of people who are neurodivergent too.
You are absolutely correct. We haven't done exhaustive studies on the neurodivergent population, but we have found that there are certain reading groups, folks with dyslexia, and certainly a few different forms of ADHD that it works really well for. So I think you're absolutely right.
One of the things that you've been publicizing a lot lately is one of your fiction books, Operation Mom. Give us a little synopsis of that.
Yes, indeed. Operation Mom is a YA rom-com, which one reviewer described as a little bit more com than rom, and I love that description. I've been using it. This is the story of a 17-year-old girl in contemporary Mumbai who wants to get her annoying, obsessive single mother off her back. So she decides to set her up through the dating apps and get her a date on prom night, because she herself actually wants to not go to prom, so to speak, but to ditch prom and go to a Bad Bunny monk fest, which she doesn't want mom to know about. But mom, being as obsessive as she is, makes it her business to sort of interfere in everything that her daughter does. Mm-hmm. So she embarks on this mission that she calls Operation Mom. Her plan to get her mom set up with Life and a Man, and specifically find a date on prom night. Of course, though she does this because mom is obsessive, who becomes more obsessive about this whole exercise? Our protagonist, Ila. So it really goes to show that mom and daughter are perhaps cut from the same cloth. And over the course of the story, she ends up falling in love with Dave, who is not Bad Bunny, the pop idol she's been crushing over, but one of her friends who actually helps her with this whole Operation Mom mission.
Now, I know whenever I write my fiction books, there's always a lot of family stories and a lot of my personal interests that I bring into my stories. How much of you did you bring into this?
Oh, plenty. Oh, plenty. So, my friends and family will again joke, and maybe it's not a joke, say, you better steer clear of Reenita, because the next thing you know, you're going to end up in one of her books. And there's some truth to that. I remember once having an argument, with my husband. He's like, why is it that you're always sort of using us for material? Why don't you go outside the house and find things there? And I had to remind him of a showrunner for one of the comedy shows. I forget which one it is now, but, he would bring in all of the writers into his writer's room. And if there was a relatively flat day, he'd say, okay, everybody go home and have an argument with your spouse or your kids or your mother, or whatever it might be, and make sure that you argue with them and argue hard, because he knew that way, once they come back in the next morning, there's going to be plenty of material to dig into. And I really ascribe to that truism. So Operation Mom has 4 really feisty female characters. There's Mom and her floozy best friend. There is her daughter Ila and her floozy best friend. And these 4 women are crazy, are zany, are lovable, are off the wall, are extremely strong, are extremely my way or hit the highway in different ways. They're not all the same character. They're 4 very different characters. But I have seen shades of these women in my own life, friends, family. So there's a lot of sort of my own people, if you will, in there. And then there are some sort of stories or sub-stories from the book itself, which are literally cut and paste from my true teenage life into my fiction, such as, the main character, Veena, who is the mom in the story. When she was a teen herself, her daughter has discovered that she used to stalk George Michael, celebrity. And she's like, Mom used to stalk George Michael, and she has a problem with me stalking Bad Bunny. And what is up with that?
So who is your teen crush?
George Michael.
Was
absolutely. Oh, yes. I was absolutely obsessive about George Michael. And it's funny because there was a documentary that just came out on Netflix, the Wham documentary, which led me to sort of post my picture with George Michael on Twitter, and the chat went crazy.
Nice.
Yeah. I actually did it in order to hashtag Operation Mom, my book, and the chat just went nuts. So,
see, mine was John Stamos.
Oh yes, John Stamos.
Yeah.
Yes,
from his days on, I think it was General Hospital. It was when he was Blackie, before he was on Full House.
Oh, that's right. That was the original John Stamos.
Yes. You also are trying to shop the screenplay for this. Your book is a multi-award winner, but so is your screenplay.
Yes, that's right. And in fact, I realize now, as I was speaking just a short while ago, I actually confused an element from the book to the screenplay. In the book, Ila, our protagonist, has a celebrity crush on Ali Zafar, who is a Pakistani pop singer. In the screenplay version, which is not set in Mumbai like the book, but it's set in Hoboken, New Jersey, Ila has a crush on Bad Bunny, who has recently declared monkhood. So there's a bit of a difference there. And I realize I mixed up one with the other when I was talking to you about it right now. But yes, I have written a screenplay. There was a friend of mine who loved the story and wants to act in the movie version of it. And she really encouraged me to write the screenplay. So I did. And this has all happened in the last year. And the screenplay has gone on to win an award, and it has reached a semi-finalist position in 2 other contests. So
Nice.
I've got the book and the screenplay. I'm shopping the screenplay. So if there's anyone interested in making a really funny, diversity-themed YA rom-com, please hit me up. I'd love to talk to you.
Now, one of the things that have been popping up in a lot of my interviews lately is representation in the media. And it seems like we're starting to see a little bit of an improvement in that. But why do you think it's important that we keep working on this?
Yes, that is such a great question, Diane, and so hard to answer, at least in one fell swoop, because there are so many aspects and facets of diversity that the lay industry perhaps does not realize. Inclusion is not simply about including characters who represent the population at large. It's also about including industry workers, whether they are writers, directors, cast, crew, etc., to sort of create those stories in the first place. It's about making sure that things like cultural appropriation doesn't happen, which has traditionally been the mainstay of storytelling in the media for, I don't know, since the beginning of time, perhaps, or since the beginning of commercial storytelling. And why it's so important, even though you're right, it's beginning to get more attention, this whole issue, but I feel that we are just scratching the surface, because it's not enough to say, for example, I'm going to take my own example. Okay, here is a person of color, here's a person of color story, and okay, we're good to go. But then if I talk with you and you are a producer and you want to, let's say, give me notes on my story to make the script stronger, and that's a perfectly natural process in script and screenplay development, we've got to be careful that you as a producer don't change my story to make it more commercial, to go away from the underlying themes, problems, tropes, issues that are so uniquely, in my case, South Asian, in order just to make it more commercial. Because you may have this wonderful portfolio of work, which you've done before, it's commercial, it's successful, it works, so you know what works. Yet you are not familiar at this point with the intricacies of the South Asian culture, or how to portray that, let's say, on screen or in books, or if you were a publisher, whatever the case might be. And I have definitely faced that. I am definitely facing that. I know others are. And it's really important to get past that, because, again, there are different kinds of people of color, and they will tell you that what works, let's say, for the Black community is not necessarily what works for Asians in general. What does that mean? South Asians, very different from North Asians, South Asians in and of themselves. You've got like different kinds of South Asians. The whole of the Latin community will say this as well. You can't just say, okay, here's Latinx and here's the Latin community and we're done. No. Yeah. There's, Mexico is different from all of the places in South America, which are totally different from Spain, etc. So I really feel that we need to keep working at this on all levels and get into it very deeply, because our stories reflect us, or at least they should, right? And I say we, the world population, are a very, very diverse crew of people. Diversity in who we are, where we come from, our experiences, how we think, act, feel, emote, respond on a daily basis to things happening around us. There is so much to get into. Like I said, this is not an easy one to answer.
And beyond just cultural too, there's also abilities. I mean, people who are disabled, people who have different challenges in their life. We're just now starting to see actors that are actually in wheelchairs portraying people in wheelchairs. People who have amputations are actually, actors who have amputations. People who are deaf are getting roles playing deaf characters. There's so much in the world that has for so long not been represented in the media.
You are absolutely right. And I know that this has been a bit of a contentious issue because people will say, well, actors, what is acting? You're supposed to act. But to your point, if there is a deaf actor, why not cast a deaf actor rather than an actor who can act as though he or she is deaf, or whatever the situation might be? You're absolutely right. And I don't know whether the industry has just been naive and has not done it, or what are the real reasons why it's easier, cheaper, whatever. I don't know. But we as audiences also, which are when you talk about the industry, it's not just the people who are putting the stories together. The audiences are very much part of the industry because they're the consumers, right, of this content. And I feel that we as audiences have fed this inability to be inclusive for many, many, many years. And it's about time that we also recognize that and changed it.
We know, and if you think back historically, back when Shakespeare was putting on plays, women weren't allowed to be actors. They had men dressed as women portraying women. It's like, Absolutely. And then they started realizing, why don't we just have women play women? You know? And then that started to grow from there. So I don't see why it's not the same thing now. It's like, okay, we need somebody who is in a wheelchair. Why not find an actor who's in a wheelchair? You know, it should just be the same kind of thing. I don't understand why there is such a question about it.
Yeah. We have a long way to go. Like you suggested, and I agree with, we've only begun to scratch the surface of what diversity and inclusion in the media industry actually means.
Now, why do you think that is so important?
It is so important because, like I said, we, the audiences, are a very diverse cast of characters ourselves. So when you look on screen, when you look in a book, when you play a game, go to Comic-Con, whatever it might be, right? You want to see a cast of characters that includes or looks like or represents who we are. All of my stories, again, coming back to myself, because speaking from your own personal experiences, perhaps the best way to do it, all of my stories are of the South Asian experience, whether that is to do with the South Asian experience in South Asia or the South Asian experience outside of the borders of South Asia. I live in the US, so for example, but they are of the South Asian experience, partly because that's what I know. And more importantly, even, or as importantly, because others don't know, right? Mm-hmm. This comes back to sort of, even as I'm developing my screenplays, and specifically Operation Mom, which is very contemporary YA comedy. So the book is set in Mumbai. And so if you read the book, the jokes, the dialogue, the banter, the context, it's very Mumbai comedy centric, very funny, but very Mumbai. So it's not as easy to say, oh, well, just write the screenplay and set it in the US, because everything changes. The context changes, the banter changes, the dialogue, all of the jokes have to change, right? Is now a 17-year-old, but she is firstborn generation in America. Her mother is an immigrant. In the book, that wasn't the case. So why I am saying all this is because, again, the South Asian character in South Asia is very different from the South Asian character in the US. In this case, things have to change. So when you look at Mindy Kaling, Never Have I Ever, right? Mm-hmm. That appeals to a certain kind of population, but for Indians within India, Pakistanis within Pakistan, or Bangladeshis within Bangladesh, they may not resonate as much. Of course, it's not targeted to them, right? You know, it's not as correct or easy or simple or right to say, oh, South Asian, oh, Indian, right? Indian American. This is why it is important that we have to keep working at this, because the other people don't know. Other people will say, oh, well, so mom is obsessive. She doesn't want her daughter to date, But yet there's this Indian guy, his name is Dev, and she's like pushing her daughter to date him. That is not resonating. Script readers will say, of course, maybe from a very clinical script writing format, it doesn't make sense. But this is exactly the double standard of the Indian mother, modern and not so modern. This is what they will do. And this is actually where the comedy comes from, right? It's like, oh my gosh, mom, you don't want me to date A, B, C, D, E. Yet, when there's a guy who you subtly approve of, then you will go and push me towards him. I was speaking with a Mexican-American producer fairly recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, and she said, this is exactly it. This is exactly what we see in my culture. It's like I wasn't allowed to date anyone, and nobody here in the US will understand that because they think I'm crazy when I tell them that I was made to come home at 10 o'clock. But, yet when there was this guy that my parents kind of knew, they didn't know the guy, but they knew of someone who basically recommended. Then they're like, go date him, go date. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? So it's a very, very simple thing, but it can become a very complex thing when you are developing a script to take that book to screen, because it just doesn't resonate with what you're seeing of other characters in mainstream America. And it's an example of how do you truly represent that diverse character with its own set of diverse themes and diversity baggage, let's just say.
And it's so hard to fight the industry whenever they're wanting you to change things to make it commercial. There was one author that I used to read everything that she put out. She had these great characters that were realistic. The main character was a little bit chubby. She had wild curly hair. Her mother and sister were blonde and perfect. And she was interested in two characters. One was kind of dumpy, a little bit balding. And the other one was considered like the hot guy in town. But they were both so wonderful that she just kept going back and forth. And when it went to TV, all the characters looked like Barbies and Kens.
Yep.
I mean, it was everybody became blonde and thin and perfect, and it lost all of its appeal.
Absolutely. And Diane, this happens. It happens way too much. It happens all too often. And here's the other sort of just flipping that around just a little bit is when you, certainly in comedy, poke fun at situations in order to bring out the reality of those situations, it doesn't translate once those stories go to screen, or, so the producers tell us. And then keeping in mind that the way Hollywood is changing, and there's a lot of fear in sort of saying things for reasons that it might be construed as politically incorrect, and you've got to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, in my book, Operation Mom, we're talking about characters from Punjab. Now, Punjabis traditionally are not the most skinny and supermodel-esque on the planet, although when you look at the Punjabi actresses and models in the media, you're thinking, what is Reenita talking about? It's like, to your point, right? To your point. So in the novel, I talk about this, and the characters talk about this, and they will joke because, like, I, for example, grew up in a Punjabi household, and having too little skin on your bones was looked down upon. The meaning of healthy was chubby. And it was better to be chubby because it means that, you've eaten properly and you're hopefully nutritionally sound, rather than, you haven't eaten and you're too skinny. And so it's the total opposite of what you see in the media, where everybody is skinny.
Yeah, you have to be a size 2.
Yeah, exactly. So I reference this in my book, but in the screenplay version, I used some of those same sort of jokes and references and stuff, and anything to do with the physical body, they had me take out immediately because they didn't want anything to remotely touch the concept of fat. Because what if somebody thinks it's fat shaming? And anywhere. So there was a vivid portrayal of one character saying, oh, well, he was probably picturing somebody with a long pigtail and parandi, which is this long hair braid with this hair ornament, whiplashing her hips, her massive hips. And that is very Punjabi. When you wear the outfit and everything, you can see that. And I'm not saying it so that you understand the full context of the joke, as I tell you right now, but whiplashing, her massive hips, all of that, all those words had to be removed because it connotes the idea of fat and fat shaming, and somebody could think of it as fat shaming, and you don't want to go anywhere near that.
That's one of those things that kind of bother me because I am not a small girl. I have always been overweight. I am fat. I mean, I own that word. I don't think of it as an insult. It's a description. Exactly. It's like, I'm tall. I have just recently dyed my hair gray and I'm fat. It's not shameful. It's just a description.
It is just a description.
Yeah, I think that's the problem is a lot of people get so bent out of shape because they think of it as an insult.
Exactly. I remember there was in one version of the script, I had a reader say, give me some notes. And this reader said, I would have liked to have seen Mom try to pull her jeans up past her hips and she couldn't get them past her hips, something like that. And it was a comedy thing. Mm-hmm. And then another in another version, they were like, no. You could never say anything like that or never put in a scene like that. That would be fat shaming. So it's like, where do you go with this?
See, and that's the thing, though. I always think that's not fat shaming. That's reality. It's like, I think every female on the planet has had a day at least once in their life where they've laid down on the bed to get their jeans closed.
Or many days, if you're from this end of the Zoom. But yes, you're absolutely
that's not right. Fat shaming. That's just reality of life.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. And it drives me crazy.
Now, one thing I do want to ask you about how much of this is you, the list of obsessions in chapter 1 of Operation Mom.
List of obsessions, yes.
Like ice cream and
puppy dogs and Ali Zafar and Ali Zafar and Ali Zafar. I do love ice cream. I do love puppy dogs, but very specifically Cavalier King Charles Spaniel puppies. So, know. I will say when I was a teenager, I was absolutely obsessed by George Michael. Mm-hmm. There was no amount of you or anyone else, the next person telling me that, that was a complete waste of time. It wasn't going to go anywhere. Mind you, I lived in India. Okay. And George Michael lived in the UK. So really the chances of sort of me even running into him, much less getting him to fall in love with me, which was actually the fantasy in my head and maybe in the head of every woman of the 80s. I don't know, who grew up in the 80s. So the chances were very, very slim. But, there was no amount of anybody saying that to me that would convince me otherwise. I was beyond obsessed. I mean, the word obsession has no meaning in actual vocabulary. You actually saw me in those days.
And I think we're going to go ahead and break the interview up right here. And don't forget, we will have the second half of this interview next week when Reenita Hora will actually read from her award-winning book, Operation Mom. You do not want to miss that. So mark your calendar and come back, or even better yet, subscribe to Book Banter with Diane Burkhart so you never miss an incredible author interview, because we have got so many more amazing interviews coming up. And don't forget, we have got a companion magazine that is going to be coming out. We're shooting for October 1st. It's going to be a Halloween issue, and it will be filled with all of the authors that we have interviewed from season 1 until now who have anything that we can remotely connect to Halloween celebrations. Everything that is spooky and scary and mysterious will be included. So you will definitely want to check that out. If you are looking for new authors, Book Banter with Diane Burkhart is definitely the place to come. With our podcast and our magazine, you're going to find some incredible authors that you may not otherwise have heard of. So be sure to subscribe. And the magazine will be something that you can download and keep so that you can have those active links to buy all of the authors' books whenever you're interested in trying something new. And we're also planning a Christmas buying guide, which will include every single author since season 1. So if there is an author that you heard about in one of the podcasts, but you can't remember who they are, be sure to pick up our buying guide and you'll be able to find every single author that we have talked to since season 1. And there will be live links so that you can find their work. And now, are you ready for the big scoop about what's going on with Burkhart Books? Those of you who have been reading along with our Into the West Saga serial, which is a historical fiction Western series, you will be pleased to know that the final installment in the Into the West Saga serial is now available for pre-sale on Amazon. We have the ebook available for you to go ahead and pre-order now, and I want to do something special with this one. Since this is the last book in the serial, I have set the drop date for this on my birthday, September 19th. And I would love it if you would help me celebrate my birthday by buying an ebook copy of this book. My books from the Into the West Saga serial have hit number 1 in Amazon's bestsellers list in several countries, more than once, but it's only been when it's a free giveaway book. So this year, for my birthday, on my bucket list, it is to try and get this book to hit the paid bestsellers list. It will be the first book that has done that, and I have set it at just 99 cents so that you can wish me a happy birthday for less than $1. Now, I want you to be aware that this 99-cent price is just a promotion, and the price will be going up on October 1st. So if you want to get this ebook copy, you should do it now in the pre-sale and make sure that you get it for that 99-cent price. So just as a heads up, that's what's going on. And I'm getting ready today to finish outlining 2 more books that will be coming out. One is Free Bed Haircuts with Each Craniotomy, which is my personal biography where I talk about going through 7 surgeries in 6 months in 2004, with 6 of those being brain surgeries and the time I died. And just the general recovery and everything that I've gone through to get from a point where my doctors were telling me that I would be an invalid for the rest of my life, just to go on Social Security disability and live on narcotics, to having the incredible life that I have now, living with my new husband in Europe and being a self-published author and getting to do this podcast and talking to so many amazing authors and journalists and publicists. These are all things that I was told I would never have in my life. And I found a way to get it, and that's what's going to be in this book. I also have a crime thriller coming out called The Touch, which is about an FBI agent who has a mental breakdown while working a serial killer case, and she retires to Kansas to rehab animals. But the serial killer she was trying to catch comes back and starts being active again, and the Bureau seeks her out to help them finally put this person away for good. Now, there is a little bit of a supernatural element to this, but we'll get into that a little bit more later whenever I have more of an outline on this book finished. We'll talk about that on another episode. But for now, you all know what time it is, folks. It is that time for you all to go forth and be happy. Unless, of course, you're in part of the world that's having the extremely high temperatures, then stay in where there's good air conditioning and be really happy about that.